The Escazú Agreement as an instrument for placing equality at the center of sustainable development and leaving no one behind. COVID has deepened asymmetries in our region, particularly the environment has suffered the most. And as we see, the triple environmental crisis has coupled with the structural challenges and social dissatisfaction and public trust. And at the same time, the 2030 agenda is at stake. What we have seen at ECLAC is that in our region, we have an extraordinary biodiversity, but it is heavily threatened. And that this is, at the same time, this has a strong deficit of environmental information and data. The Escazú Agreement comes to provide a solution to these challenges, to meet the difficulties that most of the countries have in the region, and particularly in the case of small island developing states. It is the only treaty stemming from UN Rio Plus 20 conference. It is the first regional environmental treaty of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the first in the world to include provisions to defend environmental defenders. Currently, it is open to 33 countries of the region. It has been signed by 24, and it has 13 parties. But why does the Escazú Agreement matter? All in all, it is a central component of environmental protection and sustainable development, and it is premised on four pillars: access to information, public participation, access to justice, and environmental defenders. I will focus for the purposes of this presentation on access to information and why it is important that your countries not only sign on to and join the agreement, but also implement it fully for the benefit of your citizens. Access to information, it provides more and better information for sound policy making. It also includes specific provisions to enable transparency and evidence-based decisions. But what is the underlying basis of the agreement? Well, it is based on the idea that the environment is everyone's business, that environmental issues are best handled with the active participation of all concerned, and that access to environmental information is critical for policy and decision making. And at the same time, that environmental harm must be prevented and remedied. All of this cannot be tackled alone, but obviously all countries require collaboration within their countries and within and among countries. What are the salient features of the agreement? It is an agreement which is based on rights. It focuses on the people, on leaving no one behind, and it has a very strong importance given to capacity building and cooperation. It is also an instrument that is of particular relevance for small and developing states because it grants them special consideration in this strengthening of capacities and cooperation at the regional level. Let's look at what the agreement says, particularly on environmental information and in both the dimensions, the active transparency and the passive transparency. Let's look at the passive transparency first. This dimension of environmental information can be found in Article 5, where you will see that there are different provisions that relate to the access of environmental information that exists, that is already in the possession or under the control of competent authorities at the national level. The agreement therefore regulates accessibility, so calling for the ensuring of such right, the possibility of requesting this information, but also of avoiding most of the difficulties that some persons might have in accessing this information, paying particular attention to persons and groups in vulnerable situations. Now, access to environmental information is not an absolute right and therefore it can be refused. The agreement also contains these causes for refusal and safeguards to ensure that this is done in a limited and extraordinary manner in order to foresee specific interests and guarantee specific interests that would prevent the withholding of this information. In addition, Article 5 regulates the conditions applicable to the delivery of environmental information. You will see deadlines, the format, or some cost issues. And at the same time, it includes independent oversight mechanisms. Now, moving on to the next article, Article 6. This article deals with the generation of environmental and dissemination of environmental information. Article 6 is therefore what we call active transparency. This is the proactive issuing and dissemination of information by authorities within a country. And therefore, the agreement, what it does is it sets also some important standards for this to happen. In particular, providing for the accessibility of this proactively disclosed information, that it be made accessible without restrictions, usable by everyone, that also institutions must inform about environmental data in a regular, timely, and comprehensible manner. And at the same time, it calls for the progressive generation and collection of this data, subject to resources and to the capacities of each country. For the environmental information to be generated and to be disseminated, there are different ways that this can happen, different means for the dissemination of this information. Particularly, there are environmental information systems, but also pollutant release and transfer registers. And at the same time, there are specific provisions which are of particular importance to the Caribbean, which relate to disasters and climate change. In the case of imminent threat to public health and to the environment, institutions must make available all available information through early warning systems and information that should allow the public to make informed decisions and to limit potential damage or actual damage. How can the Escazú Agreement support Caribbean countries? It is really an instrument that is decisive on three terms: inclusive partnerships and for better economies, strong public institutions, and leveraging green solutions for transformative action. Let me explain one by one each of these. By inclusive partnerships for better economies, what we mean and what the Escazú Agreement contributes to is to the fostering of whole of society efforts, including through dialogue, through improved transparency and accountability, and also for setting the stage to build forward better. This is all the more important in the environmental domain, where natural capital is key to sustained economic growth, development, and well-being of Caribbean SIDS. Public participation will strengthen, therefore, national policy making and ensure that government actions are more closely aligned to national needs and priorities. Furthermore, the active involvement of stakeholders in issues of concern to them is essential to effective problem solving. Partnerships and collaboration can build legitimacy, can also contribute to acceptance and ownership of decisions. The agreement also is a strong supporter of public institutions and human resources for sustainability. Inclusive and environmentally friendly recovery is also dependent on these effective public institutions, and to fulfill your mandate, the mandate and functions effectively, institutions require sufficient tools and resources and expertise. This implies building the capacity of the public sector to address challenges of common interest, and particularly environmental concern, of environmental concern. The Escazú Agreement recognizes the importance of building national capacities for environmental governance based on each country's priorities and needs. And here I would like to signify Article 10 as the main underlying basis for capacity building programs of public officials and the promotion of education and environmental awareness among the citizenry. At the same time, the agreement leverages green solutions for transformative recovery, for transformative action. The ideals of the Escazú Agreement are important in complementing the combination of policies that close gaps through environmental sustainability, and its tenets can inspire action as well in 8 sectors that we have identified at ECLAC as drivers of sustainable productive transformation: the energy transition, sustainable mobility, the digital revolution, the healthcare manufacture sector, bioeconomy, valuing and expanding the care economy, developing the circular economy, and sustainable recovery in the tourism sector. But particularly, there are 3 instruments that must be mentioned in the Escazú Agreement that will be particularly important for the Caribbean. One is the ability or the promotion of the production and disclosure dissemination of climate information to measure the impacts of climate change and disasters. Second is the establishment of environmental information systems, whereby in a single one-stop shop, countries can collect and make available information for decision making, and also for the public to be aware of environmental concerns. At the same time, the agreement calls for the establishment of pollution release and transfer registers. In particular, it obliges parties to take steps to establish these registers, making publicly available these databases or inventories with periodic information on air, water, soil, subsoil pollutants, as well as materials and waste. In the Caribbean, this will support as well some of the countries that already contain this obligation at the national level. The agreement has been hailed by the UN Secretary General as a way to enhance access to data, knowledge, and information, and also supporting vulnerable groups, thereby placing countries on a better foot to strategically preserve their natural heritage through more inclusive and community-oriented actions. It has been also backed by other international institutions and groups, as you will see in the slide, and it is closely linked to the 2030 Agenda. I would like to underline particularly SDG 13 and SDG 16. SDG 13 includes the improvement of education awareness raising and human and institutional capacities on climate change mitigation, adaptation, and impact reduction, as well as early warning. And SDG 16 contains a specific target which relates to the public access to information and the protection of fundamental freedoms. Now, if we look across other multilateral environmental agreements, the Escaz Agreement will also create specific synergies with all multilateral environmental treaties. You will see there all of them contain provisions on access to information. And if we take a closer look at the UN climate agenda, so the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, you will coincide with me in the fact that both the Escaz Agreement and these two climate treaties are very much go very much hand in hand. Whereas Article 6 of the UNFCCC calls for public access to information on climate change and its effects and public participation, and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement establishes the enhancement of climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information. The Escazú Agreement at the same time provides very similar obligations, thereby complementing the efforts that countries will have to make in order to meet the international agenda.